don't think that skill set and that knowledge has been replaced. It's certainly not being handed over effectively, really.
And I think if you dig down, obviously a lot of these sectors are just under pressure, whether it's the council, whether it's utility connections, everyone is under pressure. There's not enough skills or hands on deck.
But the reality is, the industry is kind of seen as a necessary evil.
It used to be that my dad was a brickie, and then I became a brickie, and then, my son became a brickie, and the family's been brickies for generations.
Quite often in my experience, if that money sometimes had been spent up front, it would have saved people a whole lot of money down the line.
Before we kick this episode off, I want to let you know about our next show that will be taking place in Manchester on Wednesday the 4th of September at Manchester City Stadium, the Etihad. Doors to the show will open from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have 2 keynote stages, multiple exhibitors, and lots of opportunity for networking. Details to the show is in the description. Tickets are free. We hope to see you there. Welcome to another episode of the Property Developer Show, the podcast. Today I'm joined by Tim Carroll from Dunore. Dunore are a company that provide utility connections, water, gas, electricity. What else you got? There's one more, isn't there?
Electric, water, gas, telecoms.
So
that's fibre connections effectively these days.
Super. So welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So it's an interesting business, obviously, that fits the Property Developer show amazingly because it's a much needed part of any new build site or any site in particular, whether they're converting commercial to flats or whatever. Obviously, they still need that connection. How do you even get into that business?
Okay, so I've been in the industry some time. I kind of fell into it, really. I finished college, didn't really want to know what I wanted to do. Certainly didn't want to study anymore. I was too interested in having a good time and all that type of stuff. Small regrets, maybe. That said, kind of turned up as a temp, what was at the time a Big Six energy supplier. And it kind of just came from there. Spent a number of years there working myself all the kind of to a high level or a relatively high level, so SLT in their new connections business, which is effectively what you've just explained. And yeah, I kind of moved through the industry really, more senior roles as I moved on, and really worked in a number of different companies along what would be the typical new connections journey. Unfortunately for property developers, it's not just one company that you have to talk to get connected. It can be multiple, sometimes individual companies for each prospective utility. But then also you have to talk to energy suppliers to get the meter. So, one person for the cable, one person for the meter, energy contracts, that type of stuff. And also, your own kind of subcontractors, you've got to dig holes. We know what happens when we dig holes. And yeah, I basically worked at a number of companies through that journey effectively. And it got to a point where I believe that I could deliver a better service, but also lead people better. So I kind of just fell into it really, and we created the business to, one, try and change the industry a little bit. I think sometimes it gets a bad rep, but also sometimes it's justified. I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding and appreciation what you have to do from a regulation perspective, a design perspective, approvals for councils, that type of stuff to get connected. We're trying to change that a little bit, really kind of navigate our customers through what's a arduous and fragmented journey. And if we can develop some people doing that whilst growing our business, then absolutely fantastic.
So for someone that's never heard of this type of business, obviously Dunore and the utility connections, how can you explain your service to someone? Okay,
so I think, to define us, we're effectively utility project managers. So I'm not going to turn up with a jackhammer or a digger, a van with Dunore to come and dig holes and lay cables. Effectively, Dunore are utility project managers, award-winning as well. We've done pretty well over the last couple of years, and been recognised for the service that we give to our clients. We're investors in people. I'm a great believer, before you think about what and how, it's about who. Really having the right people on your bus, if you like, and not just the right people on the bus, but the right people in the right seats. We're trying to change and drive performance in what certainly is perceived as an underperforming industry. And we're just trying to navigate our clients and, property developers, construction, commercial construction, house builders. We work with a lot of third-party intermediaries, and we're just trying to navigate them through an industry that is difficult, even to the people that have done this multiple times. If I was to define the market at the highest level, you'd probably split it into two. So the informed customer that knows what they're doing, but still doesn't want to do it. And then the uninformed customer that has either never done it before and it's a one-off, or they are going to have to do it multiple times because they're moving into construction or property investment, and they're not quite sure how to go about it, really.
So effectively, any obviously utility connection that we've discussed, the telecoms, the gas, the electric, the water, you effectively project manage that connection. You speak to the actual engineers that make it happen. You speak to the utility companies that obviously are going to put the feed into there. You bring it all together. So basically, developer like myself, and obviously a lot of people that watch this podcast, ain't got to worry about the utility connections.
Absolutely spot on. And I think it kind of goes a little bit before that. I think one of the biggest single reasons why a development is delayed is utilities. Now, that's some of it sometimes linked to the points I've made around, sometimes the industry underperforms, but it's also to do with a lack of understanding and a lack of education of how the process works and how long it takes. My message to all of our customers is engage us at the earliest opportunity. And even sometimes that's even before they've bought the site. We will go and do an audit effectively, what existing infrastructure is there. First thing we'll look at is, what can we reutilize? Let's not start ripping stuff out to bring new stuff in if there's something there that we can adapt, alter. And for the sake of what's relatively a small cost, when you think about the price of land and the price of development, whether that be through capital investment or finance, the risk of not understanding the existing utility infrastructure before you press the button is quite high. I've got multiple projects whereby the costs have come in for utility infrastructure, and they weren't what the client was expecting effectively. And sometimes it can be the difference between making a profit on that development or not. And I think the industry itself in the UK is in a challenging time, really. Absolutely correctly, we are pushing net zero. So we're looking to reduce our carbon as much as possible. And in theory, that's absolutely the right way to go. But at the same time, the network, or our existing electricity network, for example, it's just not big enough, and it's just not capable enough for, let's say, everyone in the country tomorrow to have an electric car, for example. So there's some serious challenges around that. And hopefully we can help at the highest level in terms of becoming a known authority in the industry and really consulting on that and how we actually get to net zero. There's so many intricacies to delivering a connection, and sometimes we work with demolition as part of the demolition as well, to make sure that we get stuff out safely before we even think about building something. For me, it's challenging. Every day is different. it is certainly not a one size fits all approach. I'm not selling widgets. I'm not selling fresh farm eggs. It's a consultative service. And what we always try and do is, one of my favorite sayings is begin with the end in mind. So what are we looking for in terms of the end result, i.e. that meter on the wall? How do we get there? And we work backwards effectively in terms of putting together a strategic plan of how we'd get something connected.
No, it makes sense. Where do you think the bad reputation for the industry, where do you think that comes from? Do you think that's a generic thing across the board, or do you think it's specific to...
Yeah, look, I think you'd have to break this down a little bit. I think, like I said earlier, I think it can be from a lack of understanding. So, I'll get 4 or 5 phone calls a week to say, look, I need this, this and this. When do you need it by? Next week. And look, we can do some stuff pretty quickly because we know the processes, we have the contacts in the various areas. But the reality is there is process to go through to understand, the actual network and its capability. And then even once you've got past that point, if we're managing a connection, in the middle of, Liverpool city centre, then we've got to get approval, or the provider has to get approval from the local council to start opening up the footpath or the road. Now, this takes time. So I think there's sometimes a misconception of, how complex and the detail you have to go into to get connected. But that said, I'm not getting certain people out. I'm not giving certain people a get out. The reality is, the industry is kind of seen as a necessary evil. And in some instances, the level of customer service is not quite there. You'll have seen in the news, over the last sort of 12, 18 months around energy suppliers and the energy crisis. Now, going back when I worked at a large energy supplier, we were putting meters on the wall in sort of 2-3 weeks. The reality is it's taking them 8 weeks. It takes them a week to respond. So what was the simplest part of the journey is now potentially one of the most difficult parts to get done, particularly if you're looking to move or alter an existing meter asset. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think, look, as a country and a world, we've gone through some challenging times in the last few years. COVID, Brexit, obviously the stuff that's going on in Ukraine has had a significant impact to some of these companies. And I just don't think that they've kind of recovered from the challenges that they've had. Yeah. And look, they are challenges. And, it's easy for me to sit here and say this stuff because whilst I'm kind of in the industry, I'm deliberately sitting just outside the industry. One, so I can affect change better. But I also know these guys carry a lot of the risk. And what I'm trying to do, I'm not going to sit here and just slate all the providers because the reality it's about working together. So sometimes customers don't understand and their expectation is a lot greater than reality. Sometimes I have some challenging conversations, just because someone doesn't like the answer to certain questions doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just what it is. But what we do try and do is the moment we get eyes on something, we start managing that risk, whether it's time or cost. And in some instances, our kind of transparency, the way we'll look at something and give loads of information before we've even been appointed to do something, it actually means some people will take that information and try and do it themselves. You get 2-3 weeks down the line, you get another phone call. And then not only do we have the challenge itself, but then we've got to start unpicking stuff that's been done incorrectly. So it's twofold, really. I think, look, for a long, long time, I think there's always been a perception around the utilities and energy industry in terms of a lack of performance, and sometimes just justifiably. But the flip side to that, I think, is just particularly the layperson not understanding what goes into, what seems like a really simple task of putting a pipe or a cable in the ground. it's not quite as easy as that.
I think if you're in property, you've got to learn to live with all, because it's not just utilities, it's across the board, and I think if you dig down, obviously a lot of these sectors are just under pressure, whether it's the council, whether it's utility connections, whether it's any building control, all this sort of stuff. Everyone is under pressure. There's not enough skills or hands on deck to make things happen in an efficient manner. And I think now it's at a point where it's so inefficient that for someone to come in and make it efficient takes time. And for someone to do that, it's just not practical, because they haven't even got the staff or the infrastructure to deal with what they currently deal with, never mind trying to improve what they've got. So it's almost like now we're just constantly trying to chase our tail to just make stuff happen. There's 4.3 million house shortage. SME developer numbers are, evaporating year in, year out. I think I was reading Glennicum report this morning. I think 19% were down on development productivity. I think I don't know if that's the exact figure, but it's high compared to last year. So it seems that the output is lesser, which obviously factors in, the economy side and stuff. But I think it's the process, and a lot of people were blaming COVID to start with, but now we're so far past that I think the ripple effect of that is still being seen today.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. All those points are absolutely bang on. And I think one thing that I really resonate with you on is the skill and the experience piece. I think so many people have, I've been in this industry ultimately 15 years now. You go back 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was working with, I was only a kid really, and I was working with people that were probably near in their end of their career, so knowledgeable, so skillful. And I don't think, like a lot of industries in the UK, I don't think that skill set and that knowledge has been replaced. It's certainly not being handed over effectively, really. And I think it's also a mindset thing. I've been very deliberate. We've got 11 FTE as we stand today, which is not bad considering it's our third
full-time member of staff.
Yeah. Sorry, full-time employees. Well, speaking corporate, I haven't been there for a while. Which is not bad considering, we're approaching our third birthday in July, and not one of those people have come from the industry. They've been taught from scratch.
Wow.
And the reason for that is just about behaviour, really. So we recruit on a bit of a criteria, really. It's cultural growth, not cultural fit, because our culture is constantly developing. So the culture that we have today, which I think is pretty good, is not necessarily the culture that's going to be there in 3, 4, 5 years' time that I'm strategically trying to get to. And then, grit, determination, the ability to overcome challenge. And then one of the most important things is, the ability to learn stuff new. And I think we have gone down the industry skill piece. Like if I need a certain skill set in a certain role, for example, if a finance director, I'm not going to go and get someone that's really bright but has worked on the tools all that. But to a point in our business, when I have gone to the industry, it's not really worked very well, because there is almost a way of working and a mindset that ultimately what I opened up with is part of the problem. We've always done it like this, or the industry does it like this. Well, that's the last thing I want to hear. That's half the reason why the service isn't quite there, and why customers basically don't like dealing with these type of companies. So for me, it's again go back to the point around it's who before how and why what we do effectively.
Let me just pause this episode for a moment to quickly introduce you to our episode sponsor, the Property Finance Collective. Transforming visions into reality requires not just a great idea, but the right financial support and the best possible team around you. Specialising in development finance, bridging finance, and commercial mortgages, the Property Finance Collective are there to help you navigate complex markets to secure the funding you need, as well as being part of your team that you can rely on. With a flair for creative deal structuring, they tailor solutions that fit precisely with your project's demands, ensuring speed, efficiency, and flexibility. They want to help you make the impossible possible. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think it's a across the board sort of that heavy industry side of things. I think the skill set or the level of talent and skills that are coming through, it's just not where it was, 20, 30 years ago. The tradition was, that you go to university, you get a degree, you get a hard working job and you work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you go home, that was the life. Whereas now people are more interested in being, social media influencers or, all that sort of stuff. And that has taken away from actual skilled labor, which is so needed to keep economies going, all that sort of stuff. I think it's moved away from that. And I'm seeing it as well, sort of people my age, they're not, it used to be that my dad was a brickie and then I became a brickie and then, my son became a brickie and the family's been brickies for generations. Whereas it's not quite, because of the information that's out there now and the access people have got to opportunity, it's not that. So it seems that, utilities, trades, heavy industries, the actual, I suppose, I guess what you're alluding to, the knowledge and skill set isn't being passed down efficiently. And the people that are now coming through are lesser. I'm not saying that the qualities of those people are worse or better. I'm assuming they're probably the same quality, but instead of having 100 good people to pick from, you've only got 50 quality people now, or 50, good candidates that potentially work in an industry that's shrinking as well. And I think I don't know how, I guess, the long-term effects of that. Obviously, we're seeing it from a micro perspective with how difficult it is to get stuff done, but I don't know what we can do to combat that scenario. I don't know how you as a business is, obviously more on apprenticeships and stuff like that. I don't know if that aligns to what you guys are.
But potentially, I think. Look, first of all, it starts off with a clear recruitment and selection process. Are we being strategic enough and good enough in terms of getting the right people in? And then from there, do we have a clear induction strategy? Onboarding strategy, induction strategy. Yeah, okay, that might be 6-12 weeks, but it then doesn't stop. Everyone in our business has, their clear personal development plan. And what we're trying to do is create, options for career paths.
Mm-hmm.
We've spent a lot of money on people development over the last 3 years, and that's including myself from a leadership perspective. So we've got clear budgets on that. And again, there's some stuff that everyone goes through, whether it's, handling conflict, courageous conversations, but there's also bespoke stuff that's, everyone has a different route. And also what I always find frightening in our industry is certainly at entry level at some of these companies, they've never seen it physically. They might know the process, the system, but they've never seen a meter being fitted, or they've never seen, a trench being dug, a pipe being laid, a connection being made. They've just not seen it, and I find that it's madness, really. Certainly from my perspective, the way I learn. Yeah, you can tell me it, the theory all you like, but probably 10-20% only goes that into my head, and I probably find it really, really boring. But if you can relate that to something physical and visual, then it's so much better. So what we do try and do is, it's a never-ending journey, really. I'm still doing a bit of the work, and the whole idea is me stepping back, and that's also down to me because I'm a bit of a control freak. And I need to let go a little bit. But what I do is spend a lot of time with our guys. If someone asks me to go and look at something, or we've got a project certainly that's in the local area, then what we will do on a rota basis, we'll make sure that the right people are viewing that and actually seeing what it means and what it takes. And then there's also an appreciation, I might come across I'm giving the industry a kick in, but there's also appreciation from my people of what these, the gangs that dig the holes, that, the engineers that go out and survey the jobs. There's also then as an appreciation of what they have to go through in order to deliver what we're asking them to deliver. So for me, people development is, it should never stop really. Some of it has to be self-driven. You've got to have the attitude to self-learn. And providing we create an environment to encourage that and supplement it with proper learning development, then I think, we're only going to get better and better for me. I think maybe, there's too many people being seen as, a bum on a seat in, let's get them in because we've got a vacancy type of thing.
Yeah.
We've got, some resource that we need to fill. But are we really investing the time and cost into that person so, they can be even the leaders of the future, really? So, the reality is to onboard someone new versus developing, promoting an existing person, we all know how that stacks up from a financial perspective.
Of course, yeah.
And look, we have a clear people strategy. I'm very, very, very lucky to be supported by what is an external HR partner. I've got a very good people director that supports us, and she's awesome. She also makes sure that I do everything right. So yeah, it's the four cornerstones of our business. The first one is people, then we've got community, service knowledge, expertise is one, and then the final one is communication, because I think that's probably why the industry also gets a bit of a bad rep. Are they communicating proactively enough? Not just with customers, but with their people.
Yeah, of course.
And for me, again, like I said, it's yes, we've got a clear why, but it's a who as well before how and what.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. So in terms of like what is the most common mistake you see with people, developers specifically, when it comes to utility connections?
Not doing stuff early enough.
Right.
And not getting help. So depending on the scope of works that we're managing, quite often, certainly the lower end of the market, your smaller developments, your single plots, etc. The reality is, if you're appointed us, you're probably going to spend more money than you've got the physical cost for the infrastructure, and when you're at the lower end of the market, there's not too many options in terms of who you can use for a new electricity service, for example. So I guess the answer to the question is, one, not getting help from an expert, and two, not doing it soon enough. It's weird that it can almost be forgotten until the last minute. I've seen developments with roofs on, watertight, and no utility connections been accepted.
Jeez.
I'm serious. They might have been taking, they might have a Jenny to, and a Bowser for water. So they've not bothered with temporary supplies for construction. And then they're kind of like, oh, I need electricity and gas supply. And they go direct, and they're being told, well, it's 4-6 weeks for a quote, and it's 12 weeks to deliver. Well, hang on. I'm supposed to hand over in 3 weeks. And it's crazy. The bigger the job, the bigger the projects that we work on, it does open other options. So sometimes there's some options outside the statutory network providers, what's called ICPs, independent connection providers. Now that's where you can create savings, and where we can potentially pay for ourselves and some, because what those guys do, they take into account the future value of that asset. a electricity supply is an asset effectively.
Of course, yeah.
At some point, someone's got to provide power through it. Now, that asset can be adopted by an alternative party, and they might take a view on it that the fact that there's long-term value to them owning that asset, and therefore take a view on the network and the ICP, if you like. They'll take a view on the fact that they can become more competitive, taking into account that there is long-term revenue to be made through that asset. You pay your energy bill to an energy supplier. The reality is only a proportion of that is for the commodity. A lot of it is for the non-commodity. So basically paying, people like the network or the meter asset owner, effectively rentals, because they own it. So they'll go, right then, Mr. Supplier, to supply this customer, you've got to pay us to use our infrastructure. So there is some options. The higher up you go up the market, particularly when you're starting to install substations and that type of stuff. And that, that's another challenge in itself. So what we will do is when we get a project, we will pretty much know straight away whether there is a potential alternative. And we'll do the statutory applications, because in most instances you always have to do that anyway, because you're probably connecting to their network. But that doesn't mean the network that we're putting in beyond that doesn't mean they get to own that. There is some alternatives on that, and we'll know quite quickly whether that's an option, and we'll do some what we call ICP tendering effectively. But I guess my message is contact us at the earliest point. I do understand that sometimes you don't want to spend money when you're not sure 100% that stuff's going to go ahead. But quite often, in my experience, if that money sometimes had been spent up front, it would have saved people a whole lot of money down the line.
I think that cameos quite nicely to round off this episode then. If people do want to get in touch with you and find out how they can deliver a successful utility connection, how can they go about doing that? Okay,
I think probably there's two methods. So, obviously we've got a website, www.dunore-connections.co.uk. All our details are on there. And we're also visible on LinkedIn as well. So, Tim Carroll, you can contact me directly. Alternatively, go through the company page, and we've got lots of people that are as skillful and knowledgeable as me now, and they're certainly keen to help. Really, for me, it's got to be bigger than profit. It's not about making a quick buck. We really want to add value to people effectively, and just make sure that they get what they need.
Absolutely. And failing that, they can come see you at the Property Developer Show on the 4th of September.
Good point. Yeah, really looking forward to it, mate. Absolutely. There's a couple of us coming up. I've got a couple of lads actually that support me that live in Manchester, so they're going to be popping in and helping us too. So yeah, really looking forward to it, mate.
Super. Well, it's going to be. I'm looking forward to obviously people meeting you there and hearing more about the utility sides of things. But no, thank you very much for coming on today, Tim.
Top man, appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks again to the listeners. Obviously, if you are listening on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. And if you're listening to the audio versions, please do leave a review. Obviously, if you're looking to get any connections to your development, whether it be new build, commercial, whatever it might be, any utility connection whatsoever, have a chat with Tim and I'm sure he'll be able to help. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.